Welcome to Networking RX, a podcast devoted to helping business professionals like you enhance your networking skills in order to become more proficient giving and receiving quality business referrals and improving the overall quality of your life and the lives of those around you. The Networking RX podcast is a production of AmSpirit Business Connections, an organization whose mission is to empower business success through networking.
Welcome to the Networking RX podcast. I'm your host, Frank Agan, founder and president of AmSpirit Business Connections. Today, we have another great guest on. As our ongoing subscribers know, often on this podcast, I share ideas and insights on best practices for building professional relationships. But from time to time, I will be interviewing people, subject matter experts, authors, speakers, thought leaders, social scientists. These individuals share their knowledge to help us build relationships as well as understand why human interactions work the way they work. I'm having trouble talking today. Today I have on the program Scott McCarthy. Scott's coming to us from north of the border. He's in Canada. He's a graduate of Canada's prestigious Royal Military College. He's actually got 2 degrees there. He recently finished up a master's program. Masters of Defense. I've never heard of that, but I'm sure you'll elaborate. But through that, and even before that, he's been exposed to leadership all his life. He has always sought leadership positions, and whenever he could find them. School council member when he was in high school, commanding a commander in the Canadian Forces. He has the experience level to lead people, lead troops. He is in the Canadian Forces, but it's also building some other things. He's also a public speaker and a lecturer for leader training amongst junior executives. So Scott, welcome to the program.
Frank, my man, it's so great to be here and great to talk to you yet again.
Yeah, I was on your podcast and that was good. And that really, it was nice to get on your podcast because then that opened my eyes to your podcast. And I was just I always like to look at other people's podcasts. You have had a litany of great guests. Gleb Kaspersky is who introduced us. Shout out to him. And so just looking down, and you really kind of got into, you've had great guests over the years, and much of it has been guests. But I went early, your number 15 episode, you talked about credibility. I believe it was Maximize Your Credibility was the title of the episode. And that really jumped out at me because I look at relationships as is really kind of a broad thing. And credibility plays into it. Our credibility plays into it. And I'm sure that with the things that you do with the Canadian Forces, you have your troops. Well, I don't want to say the people you lead. I don't want to say troops. People get the image that you're in battle. But the people you lead, if you don't have credibility with them, you have nothing.
Absolutely.
And I think that's true across the board in any leadership position. So we're going to talk on that. I guess I want to give you an opportunity to talk about, your journey to get to this position. You also are building a business, more or less. You have a vision beyond your military service. And I thank you for your service. We thank people in the United States. And I had a guy on with the Israeli Air Force, thanked him for his service. So thank you for his service. But anyhow, push it off to you and share your story with us, please.
I guess I'll do a quick Coles Notes version. So I joined the Canadian Army right out of high school. Literally missed my graduation for it to sign up. And went off to Royal Military College. Finished up with my degree there, my bachelor's degree there in 2006. And I got posted out west to Edmonton, Alberta, where I served with 1 service battalion as a transport platoon commander. Got the command up to 85 soldiers at one point as a young 24-year-old. 24? Yeah, around there, give or take a year or two. And then 2009, I deployed to Kandahar, Afghanistan. And my mission over there was a bit different than normal missions. I was embedded directly into the Afghan National Army unit, where I provided mentorship and guidance to their officers in military planning and conducting operations. So, twofold role. So the unit was called the Operational Mentoring and Liaison Team. So the mentoring aspect, providing that guidance and mentorship to their officers and planning those operations. Liaison part was being that connector between the Afghan National Forces and the coalition forces. So we're the ones that would be, helping making those relationships between the two basically militaries, as well as helping bring in different assets that the Afghan National Army didn't necessarily have, such as fast air, close air support, medevac, helovac, artillery support, et cetera, event of sticky situations. Came back home in 2010, and they decided to move me to Borden, Ontario to become an instructor of new junior officers coming up through. And then spent 4 years there doing that, was promoted to my current rank of major and posted to here, Kingston, Ontario, where I spent 2 years on what we call the non-combative evacuation operations team, where I would go around to different countries around the world and just looking at our plans in the event of some catastrophic failure in some kind of country, and how would we evac Canadians and US, and as well as US and Australia and et cetera, people out of those countries. So 2 years of globetrotting with that team. And then following that, I was selected to command again, where I commanded a squadron of 200 members, which you can call troops. It's all good.
Okay.
200 members for 2 years, where I commanded that. And then, as you hinted at, I most recently completed the Joint Command and Staff program, which is, again, a select program that everybody gets to go through, which I came out with my Master's of Defense Studies. So we look at a bit of international relationships, strategic operational level planning, and all those different types of things. How the military operates in basically at the strategic level with all the other government departments here in the country, as well as how do we fit in with other nations, partnerships, and all that type of stuff. So a year of studying that, most of which was away from home. Because that's taking place in Toronto, which is 2 hours down the road from here in Kingston. My family stayed here in Kingston, and I was up there until COVID hit, and we went dispersed learning. So,
Gotcha. Well, I mean, you have all of this, and on top of this, you have a podcast that's 140 some episodes in. Well, as we're recording now, I don't know where it'll be when this comes out. We're a few months out releasing, which is impressive. Most people start a podcast and they quit before 10. And you're really a thought leader in leadership. I mean, you have the background. I mean, obviously, the credentials, working in the military, and there are people in corporate America, I'll use that term, corporate Canada or whatever, who don't have who don't have that kind of don't have the kind of leadership credentials that you have here. So again, very impressive, and you're all that stuff, and you're basically starting a business.
That whole part, I guess, it was twofold. One, right out of RMC, even I was interested in leadership, because I was like, I'm gonna be leading troops. I'm gonna be leading, these men and women's lives are gonna be in my hand. It behooves them for me to be the best leader that I can be, period. And I didn't feel ironically that the training I went through was enough. So I started reading books.
Right.
And every book I get my hands on, I started reading. I started back in the day, blog posts, which still exist, but not as popular now. I start reading blog posts, and then eventually, when I went to Kandahar and then came back to Canada and I was teaching, I was like, wow, I actually like this coaching and teaching part. And then you realize, it was kind of like a connection started to make, where I was like, I like this leadership thing. I'm running out of resources because I've dove into it so deep that I'm starting to reread things told by different people in different ways, but the same principles essentially. And there was other questions out there that I weren't finding the answers to. So a longer story summed up, when I took command there in 2016, my wife as well, she had changed careers. She selected to become a medical doctor through the Forces sponsorship program. So she was actually in residency. So we had a 1-year-old at home, and she was on her residency program, and I was commanding 200 people at the same time. And in the evenings, I was like, well, I'm here alone by myself. What am I going to do? So I started the podcast because I was like, it was just the connections were being made in my mind. I'm like, well, let's start the podcast. Might as well start doing something in the evenings to keep myself occupied while my wife is busy away doing her thing. And I got a 1-year-old who's asleep at night. And I'm not the type of person who would just sit there and binge watch Netflix all the time. So that was the start of the podcast. And then suddenly it just started growing more than what I expected, more than I anticipated, more than I could ever dreamed. And then I realized one day, I'm like, this could be part of my exit strategy from the forces. We all leave at some point. And I knew I was going to leave early enough in my age to not retire. I don't have a plan right now exactly. 2026, I'm out, this day or anything like that. But I need to have myself set up for success for when I do leave. And then I started to realize the podcast could enable that. And then that's hence why it started growing to the point where, I believe episode 140 got released today. Actually, it was yours, I do believe. Our interview was the one that got released as we speak today. So, that's basically the whole premise behind the show.
All right. Well, let's jump into it. Episode 15. And I went through and I took some notes, and I don't like the term podcast gold, but there were some good quotes in here I want to kind of throw at you. We can just kind of kick them around here for, 10, 15 minutes. And trust is built on credibility. Credibility is built on acting in others' interests before your own.
Yep. 100%. So basically, if you break it down, for me to have credibility with you, I have to have your best interest. So right now, the reason why you have me on my show is because I brought you on my show and we built a relationship, right? So in your lane, we had some networking. But out of that networking was the credibility between us. I built some credibility with you. You built some credibility with me that, hey, we both know what we're talking about. We're good folks. We enjoy talking. We believe we have similar values and stuff like this. And at the same time, it's like, okay, you can bring value to my show and I can bring value to your show. So there's a bit of credibility. If you only believe that I was going to show up to your show and go, oh, I'm the best leadership coach ever, your audience should hire me, all this junk, my credibility is going to go out the window pretty quick. And with that, are you going to be willing to bring me on your show? I don't think so. Like, I've had people on my show where it was obvious that they were just self-serving. And I've stopped interviews because of that. I've not published interviews after I've edited them or reviewed them and go, no, this person only cares about themselves. They're not actually serving my audience. So that's where this credibility. Now the trust comes in. Like, we have this credibility piece built. Now you trust me. You trust me to talk right here, right now, to not interrupt me, right? You trust that I'm going to represent your show to your listeners in their best interest. So that's what that basis is all about.
Yeah. It's interesting. People will say, I have credibility, or I'm trying to have credibility. And after I've listened to this particular episode on your podcast, again, for listeners, it's Moving Forward Leadership Podcast, episode number 15. People say, well, I have credibility. I'm trying to build credibility. I maintain that credibility is not something you achieve. I mean, like, you have a master's in defense. You will always have that. Right. But you won't always have credibility, because you use this statement in that podcast: credibility will always be judged.
That's right.
Day to day, I mean, it's like bathing.
Yeah, no, for sure. Your credibility, especially as a leader, will always be judged, because you're always the one in the spotlight, right? You're the one that's up front. And it doesn't have to be a leadership. Like, we could be judging, we're subconsciously judging each other's credibility right now. you're doing it because, okay, is Scott actually talking about as if he actually knows what he's talking about, or is he making all this up on the fly? And you're actually consciously judging my credibility right now. So credibility is something that's very fluid. It's not digital, like you said. It's more analog. It flows up and down as people talk about different things, as you have different interactions with them. So I'll give you a great example from today. Actually, I was talking to one my direct subordinates today, and I was telling him that I was giving them some coaching, mentorship, and all this stuff. And I told him when I first met him that his first impression wasn't that great with me. So his credibility is a bit low, right? But I said over time, from doing this, doing that, achieving this, showing initiative here, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, it's actually my opinion of you right now is quite high. So his credibility's gone up. So it's analog. It builds over time. It shows credibility comes from the actions that you do, the things that you say, not just me showing up, seeing someone and immediately, oh, does this person have credibility or not? And again, it's not, like you said, it's not digital, it's analog. It's something that ebbs and flows along with time.
Yeah, well, you had mentioned people that you have brought on your podcast and you've never aired the episode. They had credibility coming in of some sort, and then they blew it. They totally blew
100%.
it. Yeah.
100%.
100%. You mentioned in the mission, troops, self, I guess in that order, right? I mean, the mission's number one, right? Then your troops.
That's right.
And I think if I'm recalling correctly from listening, you referenced the book Simon Sinek's "Leaders Eat Last," and I don't know if he used that, but you kind of tied those things together. I don't know if you want to comment on it.
No, mission troops self is a super common ideology that's pushed on us in the forces, i.e. you have to achieve the mission. The end state goal is the most important thing. After that, you take care of your people because they're the reason why you get to achieve that mission, right? You get to achieve that mission because they're the ones that are there. They're the ones that are actually doing it on your behalf.
Right.
Right. So, and then you take care of yourself because if you don't take care of yourself, you can't lead. And if you can't lead, then suddenly your troops, your people are left leaderless. Someone will bubble to the top, but is that person the right person for the job? Who knows? So that's why we put it in that order, because in the end, if you don't achieve the mission, you're not going to have people. Because in the forces context, unfortunately, people get wiped out, right?
Yeah.
People die. In business context, if you don't achieve your mission, i.e., bring in profits, your organization falls, goes bankrupt. Then people don't have jobs. So you have to achieve your mission, which is whatever that mission is for your organization. Then you take care of your people. Then you take care of yourself. So it goes back to Simon Sinek's "Eaters Eat Last," because in the military, and when we line up for meals, we actually do that. It goes to the point of, this is so ingrained in our culture that as the senior officer, whenever I would have meals, get-togethers with my squadron, I would be the last person to eat. I would be the last person getting whatever food was left over, essentially picking up the scraps and taking care of, and then in turn ensuring I take care of myself. So that was that whole ideology. But the thing is, going back, tying all this to credibility, is that if you decide you're going to be the one that takes care of yourself first, if you don't care about your people, if you don't care about the mission, then all of a sudden you look like a self-loathing narcissist, essentially, when it boils down to, and that's going to eat away your credibility as a leader. And what we didn't hit on, but we kind of did, is that credibility is the cornerstone of leadership. If you don't have credibility as a leader, no one's going to listen to what you say because no one trusts you. You don't have any credibility. People will go, oh, he doesn't know what he's talking about, or she doesn't know what they're talking about. There's no point. Why are we doing this? This is stupid. No. People are going to start leaving your organization. People are not going to do what they should be doing, regardless if it's the best thing or not, because you don't have any credibility to stand up, because you are taking care of yourself first, vice taking care of everyone else and the organization or the mission.
Now, in your experience in the Canadian Forces, I assume it's similar in the United States Army, Air Force services. Do you have people who just can't get beyond that?
Yeah,
I mean, that's got to be a weeding out process or a weeding out factor.
So yes, sometimes, and other times, unfortunately, they do get by, but eventually it does catch up to them. One of the worst commanding officers I ever had was totally narcissistic. Only cared about her ambitions, her goals, and stuff like this. And I'll tell you, the time before this person showed up, and to the time after when she had showed up, the unit was night and day. You want to see a organization nosedive in output, in morale, go skyrocketing with mental health issues. I'll show you a person who only care about themselves.
Interesting.
And complete, inverse compared to the person that was commanding before them. So,
right.
I've seen it. Unfortunately, it does happen. It happens at all levels. It happens everywhere. So it does occur, but if you can get past that, if you got to look past it, you start taking care of yourself, right? You start ensuring that your teammates are taken care of. At least if you can control what you can control and worry about what you can control, it'll help you get through those situations. But no, it happens for us for sure.
Yeah, well, that kind of ties into one of the other quotes I have. Your organization is linked to your credibility. Essentially, what this woman did was kind of tore down her unit, or however you want to define it.
So the impact of that, i.e., the nosedive in morale, the skyrocketing mental health issues and stuff like this, our unit now seen around the base was seen as a loser unit, a place where people didn't want to go to. Why would you want to go work there? The credibility of the organization is shot because of all the issues that were occurring. People talk, right? And it's no different in business. As soon as you start seeing credibility of a CEO, something comes out, a CEO did something in their past that is like completely against, ethic values, moral values, whatever. What do you see? You see a friggin' nosedive in the stock.
Yeah.
Because that is the shareholders' response to that lack of credibility in the organization of its leader. And you will even see to the extreme point of that CEO getting fired. There was an example, I forget the name of the company, but there was a CEO that was dog sitting for his friends. And that CEO was caught on video in an elevator, basically beating the crap out of the poor dog. And he apologized for it. He made donations. He did community service, but CEO got fired.
Yeah.
Stock tanked. Why? Because the credibility of that one individual, the leader of that organization, was shot due to the actions that they did.
Right.
So if that person stays, then that can continue. We're seeing it right now. We saw it with Uber. It was another great example, right?
Yeah.
With all the sexual misconduct that, all that stuff that was going on. We're seeing it up here in Canada with one of the cannabis companies, Aurora Cannabis. We're seeing issues with that company, and the shares are sunk. Like, it's to the point where it's almost a penny stock. It's ridiculous because of the credibility of the organization.
Well, and that ties into the final quote I have. You view credibility as a currency.
Yeah, I remember. That one is. I stated, I believe I prefaced it with, this is basically extreme last case scenario, right? That you want to view it as a currency. So if you're in a bind, so this is more of a personal thing. So if I'm in a bind and all of a sudden I realize that I didn't do something, I can use my credibility to get what I need. So I'll be like, yeah, I'm kind of like you. Oh, I messed up and I can't deliver what I said I was going to deliver on time. That is now using your credibility is kind of like a currency to get something in return for giving your credibility up a bit. Now, again, as I said in that episode, like, this is something that you don't want to just go around doing all the time, because what's going to happen is all of a sudden you're going to erode your trust, which is going to completely crush your credibility. And after a while, people are just going to stop relying on you, thinking of you, wanting to deal with you, following you, whatever the case may be. So currency is like one of those, break glass and break open glass in case of emergency type thing. But it's possible. I'll admit I've done it in the past because I've made mistakes and I've traded my credibility to, get some help from somebody, get a little bit more extra time to do something, stuff like this. But the thing is, you got to rebuild it, right? You can't just go take, because it's going to crush. Eventually you got to rebuild that, and you turn around, you help them back, and you help them, and you keep going, and you keep delivering on time, on target, etc., to build that credibility back up. But you can kind of use it as a currency exchange in that regard.
Okay. Listening audience, how can they help you? Listen to your podcast, certainly. Right?
Yeah, for sure. If you want to check out the podcast, it's movingforwardleadership.com. You can subscribe easy by going to movingforwardleadership.com/subscribe. The website's where everything is hosted for me. So all my social media posts, profiles are there at the bottom of it. The podcast show notes are all there. If you're interested in a particular episode, such as this one we discussed, number 15, if you go to movingforwardleadership.com/15, that does all the links for all the shows. So no matter what number you put in, it'll bring you to that show number. But come check me out. And it's been great here talking to you, Frank.
Best way to get a hold of you is through the website?
Yeah, you can get a hold of me through the website. There's actually a built-in Facebook Messenger thing, or you can just shoot me an email at scott@movingforwardleadership.com. And if you forget that, there's a contact me thing on there, of course.
Okay, great. Again, thank you for your service.
Thanks. It's a pleasure. I served alongside Americans in Afghanistan. Worked with a unit there heavily, and I've been in all kinds of NATO stuff. So it's a pleasure to work with all kinds of different nations, for sure.
Thanks for joining us on the Networking RX podcast. Please put what you've learned into action today and let us know if you have questions, comments, or ideas for future topics. You can email them to us at podcast@amspirit.com. That's AMSPIRIT.com. Finally, so you never miss an episode, be sure to subscribe to the Networking RX podcast through iTunes, Overcast, or however you receive your podcasts. Now get out and network with someone.
The Networking RX podcast is the copyright production of AmSpirit Business Connection. All rights reserved.